Hey guys, welcome back to the Better Not Bitter podcast. I am your host, Maya Warren, and today I have a special guest with me. His name is Pastor Roy Dockery, and without further ado, I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Good evening, good afternoon. This is Pastor Roy Dockery from the Savage Truth podcast, Savage Truth YouTube channel, World Victory Church here in Greensboro, North Carolina. And just glad to be here with my little sis and talk about how to be productive, but broken. So,
hey, that's awesome. So if you haven't figured it out by now, y'all, we're going to be talking about busyness versus productivity, and also how it affects the disability community and people who deal with chronic conditions. So my first question is kind of subjective, so you can answer however you feel. And the question is, what do you define busyness as?
So I define busyness as occupying time. I think that's the best way I would define busyness, right? Like you have time and you just find something to do with that time. That's busyness.
I definitely agree with that. And oftentimes just being busy, trying to find something to do can lead to burnout, yes. which leads to the other side of the coin, productivity. What does productivity mean to you, or how do you define that?
So I would say productivity is using time to get to a desired outcome or to complete a task, right? So it's using time to be impactful is how you're productive. So there's an outcome or something that you're trying to achieve, and then you use time to achieve it. So that's how I would define like productivity.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I came about this topic because as someone who has a disability and deals with different conditions, when I'm in spaces and places with other people who are dealing with similar things or different things, I notice that the same thing keeps coming up, and it's this pressure or almost guilt related to not being as busy as their peers who are more able-bodied. Have you experienced that, or have you noticed that with people that you've been in relationship with?
Yeah, and even to the point to where not only will you hear that from people with disabilities, but people who don't have a chronic illness or a condition will almost try to give you an excuse or encourage you to do less because being productive or busy, right, could be bad for your health, but not really understanding or kind of leaning into what you're trying to do or what kind of energy that requires. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a constant thing that we see where people, one, they try to put their standards or their expectations on you. And then so from a cultural perspective, we wind up trying to mimic and mirror those expectations for ourselves instead of understanding and individually knowing like this is what I'm supposed to do and this is what I have the energy and the ability to do. So the best way, because some of my conditions, but one of the conditions I have is lupus, and I was at like a lupus rally or something early on after I first got diagnosed, and we were doing a march or a walk or something, and somebody there shared this way of looking at lupus, and he was like, when we look at lupus, he was like, basically everybody has everyone has a bowl full of marbles. Right. And the way that he described lupus was like, you just have to understand that you've got less marbles in that bowl than most people. So then the question is what do you do with those marbles? Right. Because people can be wasteful. You can throw the marbles, you can chew a marble, you can do whatever, but you have less marbles. So what do you do with your marbles? And that was really like enlightening for me to be like, you know what? I might not have as much energy as everybody else. I may not. I might suffer from fatigue. I got to deal with, because I have sarcoidosis, mixed connective tissue disease as well. So there's things that I can't do, but what can I do with the time that I have? So I kind of shifted towards, okay, if I'm going to do something with my time, since I got a limited number of marbles, right? Like I'm going to make all of these marbles count. So I think even to your point, that's why the line between being busy and being productive is important when you have chronic illnesses or any kind of disability, because you don't have as much time, or something can take you more time because of a disability. So we've got to be able to figure out how to get to the outcome that we want, or that we desire, or that God's leading us to, despite whatever limitation or obstacle our conditions may create.
Hey, that is the dope explanation, and I say that because I'm a part of this migraine community on Facebook, I believe, and I had posed a question related to something, and someone commented an article talking about something very similar to the bowl analogy that you used, and it was something regarding spoons. And basically, they had a handful of spoons, and they would explain to their loved one, like, hey, most people have a normal amount of spoons representing energy. Well, she took some spoons away to symbolize how having chronic migraine can leave you in a position to not have nearly as many spoons as someone else. And that was helpful for me, and something that I've been on a journey of learning, navigating disability and the whole chronic illness thing, is learning how to maximize what I do have. Because if I focus on what I don't have, that'll just leave me in a state of rumination, and I keep going down and down, like, well, I can't do this and I can't do that. But I've learned to maximize and utilize the things that I know that I can do and that I can do well, and make the most of the time and energy that I do have.
Yeah, and when I lived in Colorado, I got asked to by a friend of mine to speak to a young lady who also struggled with lupus and was suicidal. And so I sat down with her and her fiance and had dinner, and was just talking to her, and I used the bowl analogy, which she hadn't heard before. But then I asked her, I'm like, what do you enjoy doing? And she was like, well, I really enjoy painting, and I enjoy this. And she started naming out all of these things that she was doing. And I'm like, okay, well, the last time that you had like a lupus flare up, or, one of these situations where you had to get hospitalized, what were you doing? And she was like, oh, well, I went out with some friends, and they wanted to go hiking and all of this other stuff. And then and her fiance's kind of got this look on his face, like, that's all the stuff that I like to do. And I was kind of like, so every time you go out drinking, hanging out, spending an excessive amount of time in the sun, doing physical activities, you know what I'm saying, on the frontier of Colorado, because this is when I was living in Colorado at the time. I'm like, so all the things that you don't like to do is what exacerbates your lupus and causes you to get hospitalized. But all the things that you enjoy doing can be done inside without exposure to sun. Yeah, and it generates something, because I'm like, you're hiking, you don't get nothing out of that except for a selfie. And she loved to paint. And I'm like, so why don't you spend more time doing that, right? Like go to a paint class with your friend, right? Go to a wine and canvas class with your friends. I'm not telling you to connect with people, but they need to understand that, like, if they love you, they need to understand your limitation. They can go hiking on another day when you're not there, right? Or, or like you go to a certain point and they go up to the top of the summit. They're going to 14,000 miles or 14,000 feet. You stopped at 7 and took your behind back to the car and set in the air conditioning until everybody else got there. And I'm like, the main thing that I see people do, especially with conditions like lupus and autoimmune diseases, is to not be transparent enough with the people around you to let them know that, like, I can't just do what you do, because a lot of times we go along to get along, and it's hurtful to us in general. But when you have a chronic illness, it's even worse, right? Like, I know people who hang around people who drink, but they don't like to drink. And when you're around the people who drink, you drink, right? Where, like, you got an autoimmune disease, alcohol, exacerbates inflammation. So you wouldn't, if you were by yourself, you wouldn't do it. And I think we just have to have more definitive lines that we're like, I'm not crossing this line. And we have to be comfortable with the fact that that'll make other people uncomfortable, or that there'll be some things that people who might be our age, or who might be our friends, or who might be similar to us in other ways, that's just not something God made us capable of doing. And that also means then I can use that time to do something else, right? It doesn't mean I sit at home, like you said, and ruminate on, oh, I can't do that and I can't do that. It's like, no, I can do some things. So that means that God's giving me more time to do those things and to be focused. And I was listening to a podcast where somebody was talking about Steve Hawkins, and he was a he was a big atheist, but he told somebody, he was like, he considered his disability an advantage. And everybody was like, what do you mean? Like, you can't move, you can't talk? He was like, you know what? Because nobody expects me to do anything. Right? He was a professor on staff. He was like, they don't expect me to come to these meetings. If there's not access for my chair, they don't expect me to be in that room. And he was like, I literally just get to focus on like conceptual physics and science all day. So he was like, I actually look at my disability as a benefit, because if not, he was like, people would be inviting me to lunch and trying to take me to go get a drink. And he was like, no one's going to ask me that because I'm Stephen Hawking. He was like, I got to type in everything that I taught. He was like, people ask me less questions. And he was like, I just get to focus on my work. And that was an interesting thing to see as well, where it's like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, people don't try to distract you with their expectation. And they let you do you, but you have to understand what doing you means and what the impact of that is, so that you can, you know what I mean? So you can do what God made you to do.
Yeah, all that is dope. And it makes a lot of sense. And to piggyback off of that, something I've really had to be conscious of is saying no and explaining why I'm saying no. Because a lot of times if you cancel like a family related thing or a friend related thing, they're like, I mean, I know you have migraines, but do you really have them all the time? Like, people don't get the severity. And so I find myself having to repeat myself. And so now I've learned to get to the point where I utilize the word no as a complete sentence and just like, hey, we can do something else, or I can catch you 2 weeks from now. But for right now, no, for my sake. And it's been almost like adding another tool to my belt as I'm navigating life with a disability and my faith. Can you talk about how saying no has helped you avoid some situations that would have otherwise been to your detriment?
Yeah, I mean, and it took a while, right? I spent a lot of time saying yes to things that I shouldn't have. One of my favorite books is called "No is a Complete Sentence," and it's just a book on how to say no and how to kind of sit in that. But yeah, like first I had to stop. I had to stop holding myself to other people's standards. You know what I mean? So like, a lot of it was like, okay, why do I even want to do this? Or why do I feel like it's an expectation? Because a lot of times it was stuff I didn't even want to do. But even when it comes to family or business or ministry, people like I used to do outreach ministry when we lived in Colorado, and I would be out in 90+ degree weather by myself, unloading a trailer, loading up clothes, like literally physically lifting enclosed trailers, connecting them to my car. And like, I was doing that as a sacrifice, but like I planned to do nothing for like 36 hours after that, because I knew that's how long it was going to take me to recover from the work that I put in on Saturday. Like, I'm not going to be able to move rest of the day. I'm going to have to hydrate. Like, I'm going to have to hospitalize myself to get through it. And then as I kind of, progressed, I'm like, you know what, and then one of my guys who's still one of my mentees, MZ, he was like, let me be the legs. Like, I don't want you physically working. So it took time for me to allow people to come in and to help me with the things that I was being busy doing, instead of letting other people be productive in their gifting. So like, like I can do everything by myself, but I shouldn't do everything by myself. So sometimes it's saying no to yourself.
Definitely.
And I think I had to learn that. And when I started saying no to myself, other people started saying yes to the things that I said no to. And I'm like, oh, so I never had to do that to begin with. That was just me trying to, trying to be Superman and do everything. Because, my wife gave me the nickname Superman. So I got to live up to the expectation. But yeah, and so I think we've got to learn how to say no to ourselves, right? And understand what our limits are and where like our best range of productivity is. Like, so 0 to 100, like I can do everything from 40 to 80 and I don't get exacerbated. But when I go down below 40, when I go above 80, we're getting into trouble. So I think that's what we've got to pay attention to. We got to say no to ourselves. We need to say yes when people are offering us help.
Yeah.
Right. Like we like to put on our disabled super cape You know what I'm saying? And be like, I don't need nothing from you. I got it. You know what I mean? Like, so we also got to, so it's like a double-edged sword. Like, we got to learn how to say no, but we also need to learn how to say yes in the same regard. And that yes is normally tied to us saying no to ourselves first. So like, nope, like Maya, you don't need to do that. And then somebody be like, oh, can I help you with that? And you be like, well, I guess so. Like, you're reluctant because it's stuff that you want to do, but yeah, you've got to learn how to, like Casper just said, you got to set those boundaries, let people know how to love you. Like, I mean, for instance, like my wife's been like, I want to get the kids out the house, but we live in the same place, Maya. It is hot as Satan's toenails outside right now. And it has been all day. And to be honest, I got a migraine starting like right over here. And my ring light is right here. So that's bothering me, but I can't turn the light down because we on right now. So like, I'm kind of squinting this eye for that reason. But my wife was like, oh, I want to go out, want to walk with the kids or whatever. My wife didn't even ask me. My wife just took the kids and left the house because it was like, I'm not going. So like, she loves me enough to be like, I'm not going to the beach. You know, I'm not doing that. So find a place with a hotel and a beach nearby so I can stay in the room and you can go to the beach. But it's having those conversations with the people around you. And first of all, reconciling that with yourself, right? Like making sure you know how many marbles or how many spoons you got. And don't let nobody borrow a spoon when you need it. And don't let nobody add stuff to your requirements that you just can't fulfill that order, right? So you got to be mindful of that.
That is a very good point about, just reconciling that to yourself. I've had conversations like the last episode I did for season 1 of the podcast. And if y'all haven't seen it, go check it out. But for that episode, I was talking with 2 of my friends. They also had albinism, and all 3 of us have what's called low vision. And we were talking, I asked them about how they're doing in the area of self-advocacy. And we all were very transparent in the fact that it's something that we still struggle with, like even asking for a ride. Like if I need something or if I need a ride, I'm like, oh, I should be able to do this. Let me find bus, let me find the Uber. But it's hard for me to ask for a ride. I've had to slowly learn that, even with something as simple as if I can't see the menu, just saying, hey, psst, can you tell me what's on the menu? And be willing to do that. So I think in whatever aspect of disability people are going through, I think that's something we all have to learn, grow, and develop in over time.
Yeah, and I think self-advocacy is very important because it's a pride, right? There's like a pride to it. There's this standard of normalcy that I think we all compare ourselves to, and then we take pride in trying to be as normal as possible and then trying to hide whatever is abnormal, right? Or if I don't have to disclose it to you, then I won't. So it's like we still want to appear as normal as possible in public. And some of it is because of people's ignorance. Some of it is because we don't like being pitied. But I think some of it is just pride. Like, like I can, like you said, I can get by, I can do it. I can get where I need to go. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I shared that on the, on our Patreon call on Monday. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had problems. I was at work, had to go to the emergency room, and nobody I worked with even knew I had a medical condition. And I had been there for 4+ years. But it was because like I didn't want anybody being like, oh, look, it's Roy. Oh, so broken, but yeah, you're doing well, right? Like you don't want to be patronized, right? Like, and so you kind of step away from that. But like at the end of the day, you can't, and and I say this with everything, like you have to fully let somebody know who you are and let them choose to love you.
Oh, that's
right. Like if you're not sharing everything about yourself, whether it's how you feel or your disabilities, your perspectives, your biases, your prejudices. Like you're not letting people love you fully. You're trying to control their love for you. So it's like, you just got to be open and honest. And it's like, if that doesn't work for people, like, you know what I mean? Like people don't invite me to go golfing because I've already told you I'm not spending a significant, like we can go to Top Golf or the driving range. I'm not about to spend 4.5 hours doing 18 holes. I'm just not like, and just letting people know that. But then, so then that way it's not like, well, you never go anywhere with me or, you always turn me down. It's like, no, it's just not something that I can do that's helpful or healthy, right? So we've got to know where to push back, but we've got to stop being afraid to let people in. And you know what I'm saying, and be transparent, as a couple people have mentioned in the comments about what we got going on.
Yeah, I totally agree. That was a word. One story I have where I failed to do this, and this was early in my advocacy journey. I was in the 8th grade on the basketball team. I just tried out, made a team, and they would go over plays and stuff in practice. And because my reaction time is a lot slower due to my vision, my coach would just keep calling me slow. She just, like, I would hear her whisper to the assistant coach and literally say, like, she's slow. Like, she's slow. Like, and I'm sitting here like, fam, you don't care to ask me what's going on. You just want to call me slow. And finally, it came to like a moment where I came out of practice and I felt so dejected because I didn't disclose my disability for the simple fact that I didn't want pity. And it was just like an area of pride for me. And boy, did I regret it. I came out of practice feeling dejected. I told my mom what was going on. She was like, oh, let's go in here. And so we get in the gym and I'm like telling my coach, like, you know, about my vision and stuff. And she goes, oh my God, I am so sorry. I didn't even know. I just had no clue. And from that moment on, I've been so upfront. It probably gets on people's nerves, but I try to make it a thing where I only got to learn once because I don't like having to learn the same lesson over and over.
Yeah, and it's funny, a similar thing. So when I was in boot camp, that was the first time I had got like really tested for sickle cell trait, because you have people that'll die from a sickle cell crisis and dehydration, excessive workout. So they had this thing where like they would give you, they called you, it was like a red belt. So it was kind of like flag football, and they gave you this little red belt that you would wear when you were doing PT. And people who had a red belt on were free to get water when it wasn't a water break. So it was like you could go, but it wasn't like mandatory. It was like optional. And I found myself, even though, you know, because of my blood, because of, you know, like genetically, like I'm more, I'm a higher disposition to dehydration and for damaging my normal adult hemoglobin, which I hadn't studied sickle cell disease at the time. Now I have. I just read a book on it a week ago to get more insight on it. But I saw it, right? Like I saw all the black guys, like, because it was like, and it was all black men. So we at boot camp, half the black men there got the red belt on. And it's like nobody wanted to go for that extra water break. We struggling to go through. And I mean, we had people passing out and you still didn't care. Be like, I'm gonna wait, because like, again, like we didn't want to feel pitied or like we were getting special treatment, when I'm like, I need special treatment. You know what I mean? So it took a while, like after I had my incident, and then I was like, training time out, and then give me some water. I just kept extra. I'm like, hey, chief, bring me some water, player. Bring me some water. Like I don't care what your role is. I don't care if you're the captain of the Navy. I need water. Bring me water. You know what I mean? And it was like not feeling, like you said, not allowing the fact that and the reality is that a lot of times we're projecting how we feel about ourselves on other people. Right? Like we pity ourselves. So when people respond to our conditions, we see it as pity, right? Like so it's we kind of project on people, and then we don't share information or let them in because of what we're assuming that they're going to do. But like we have to have those feelings inside of us to put them on people before they ever open their mouth. Right. So the more that you kind of, and like you said, the more you get out of that, like, you know what I mean? Like you don't know how people respond to it, but most of them don't respond poorly because people don't know what to do, first of all, because they're just like, okay, I don't know what to do with that information. But at some point, if it becomes useful, at least I know now, right? And it's just like up front, I'll be like, yep, I got this, I got that, I got this, I got that. And I'm not going outside. But yeah, so that's a good thing. And I think, and it all ties also into that advocacy, but we've got to be mindful as well of the things inside of us that we're projecting on other people, And again, just like I said before, we don't know until we tell them. And the worst thing they can do is respond poorly, which is what most of us assume people are going to do anyway. So the only thing that you can really, the only issue you really face is by them surprising you and not behaving the way that you expected them to.
Yeah, that is so true. So we've talked about busyness. We talked about how that pertains to having a disability and self-advocacy and how those things are related. Now, I'm curious to know, what are your thoughts on productivity as it relates to having a disability or a chronic illness?
Yeah, I talked to like a new potential mentee today, and he was like, "Tell me what you do," and I explained it to him, and everyone says the same thing. When do you sleep? And I'm like, I sleep very well, and I don't think I sleep less than 8 hours a day. But when it comes to being productive, it's when you know you've got a limited amount of marbles, or you know you only got so much energy. Like, to be honest, when I was sitting here, right, I got done with work. My wife brought me dinner, and she brought it to me in my office. And I was sitting here, and it was like 6:25. And I'm like, I've got 25 minutes before I'm going to join the StreamYard. I recorded 4 YouTube videos. Because I had some poems, and I'm like, I want to do some spoken word poems, and they were already written. So I'm like, I'm here, video setup, audio setup. Let me knock that out. You know what I'm saying? Like, I also recorded a verse, because when she brought me dinner, that's what I was doing. I owed somebody a feature, even though I'm retired from hip hop. One of my best friend's little brother had hit me up. So I'm like, let me do that. So it's like, especially being in a place where it's comfortable. You know what I mean? Like, my office is very comfortable. This chair is very comfortable and very expensive, but it's because I sit in it all day. So like, investing in things as well, right? That, like, even around the house, like, I love building things, you know what I'm saying? But like, I have automated hand tools for everything because my hands lock up. I have arthritis in my hands. You know what I mean? So like, so I'm like, even today, I was sitting here. I'm like, I had to fill out some paperwork for the Navy. It took me like an hour to fill out that paperwork because my hands lock up, and they didn't have a fillable PDF form. I got you, Casper. I didn't have a fillable PDF form, so like, that was annoying to me to have to write. I'm like, why? I got 3 computers on my desk, and I'm sitting here writing a freaking document. But so it's like, with productivity, like, you know, you hear about like ADA compliance and all of the stuff that companies have to do. I think to like aid in our productivity, one, we got to capitalize on when we have energy, right? So like, when you have energy, get the stuff done that requires energy. You know what? Because we can lay around with a migraine and tired and watch Seinfeld. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's when I catch up on shows, is when I don't feel, you know what I mean? I'm 2 seasons. I'm on like season 13 of NCIS. Like, started at season 1. But when I don't feel well, that's when I watch TV. And you know what? I know I'm going to spend a lot of time not feeling well for different reasons. He said, I need to get it surfaced. And you know, you spend time not feeling well. So it's like, that's actually when I kind of, like, some of the guilty pleasure, selfish stuff I want to do, like binge watch a dumb show or something. I do that when I'm not feeling great. One, because I like to watch a lot of comedy, so that makes me laugh and it's kind of entertaining. But then I'm not wasting time where, like, I have energy when I need to spend it with my, I'm married, I got 3 kids. So it's like, between work and like trying to get as much stuff done during my work day when I'm in this seat. Because once I leave this office, I am not a YouTuber. I'm not an executive. I'm here for my Patreon mentees and my family. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even check YouTube on my phone anymore. I only do it for my computers. So like, when I leave this space, right, like, then I shift to being productive in relationship. And when I'm in my office and in my creative / workspace, I'm focused on outcomes, right, and completing tasks. So like, dividing that stuff up, I think is useful. But at the end of the day, like, being productive requires you to be working towards an outcome, which means you need to have an objective, right, or a mission. I think a lot of people get busy because they don't know what they're trying to accomplish. Like, you don't have a target to work towards, so you can't complete milestones or make progress because you're kind of all over the place. So now I'm like, one of my favorite books is written by Gary Keller, which is Tim Keller's son. He wrote a book called One Thing. And he was like, just focus on one thing and get it done, and then move on to the next one. And then think about one thing you need to stop doing because it's not adding value or something like that. And so, and then every day just have something that you're targeting to complete, because completing something, one, gives you a little bit of energy back. So that helps, and it kind of it's like a productivity snowball. They talk about finances, like you get a little thing done, you get a little bit more energy, and you just kind of build from there. So I think with productivity, the goal is we've got to have an objective that we're working towards, and then we celebrate when we achieve an outcome that we desire, and that kind of gives us some feedback as well. So that's why, like, even in my family, I've got like our game night is scheduled. You know what I'm saying? Like our movie night is scheduled because like I'm going to save energy for Friday night. I'm going to save energy for Thursday night. So like those are my light days at work. So like, you know, so all of that is kind of balanced to try to be to try to have as much impact as possible.
That's so good. To kind of tag along with that, what would you say to someone who hasn't yet figured out what they're called to, or the vision, or the thing, the marker that they can work towards and be productive towards? What would you say to them on how to find that?
I think you find it by serving people, right? Like that's how I discovered everything that I know about myself, is in serving other people. I tell y'all all the time, half the time when y'all ask me questions, it makes me think about something in myself, but I think it's service, right? That's why, I mean, again, Jesus says a lot of complex things that are really simple, but he's like, the greatest amongst you will be your servant. Like you learn from serving other people, right? Like when, and I know you had a conversation with the applied sciences group coming in, and there's so much stuff you learn. Like if I'd have known this 3 years ago, but it's just because you didn't know the question, you know what I'm saying? So like being available to serve people, when you're serving people, you normally, or serving organizations, you gravitate towards your gifting, especially when you're serving people and not being compensated for it. You know what I mean? Like you kind of lean into your gifting. So I think, you know, everyone's like, you know, if you were doing what you were made to do, you would never work a day in your life or whatever. But for me, I think that's the key. I think service, right? Find somewhere to serve, a church, a nonprofit, people in your community or whatever, and then allow your gifts to manifest. And then once you start seeing your gifts in action, it'll start giving you more insight into your calling as you're praying about it. But a lot of us get so busy like working, like in our careers, and then we work and we do our classwork. We don't really get to serve, right? Like we serve functions, we complete tasks, we do jobs. But we don't holistically serve as who we are as the people that God made us. And when you do that kind of service, I think it helps amplify and bring clarity to what your calling is. And then as God starts to reveal those parts of your calling to you and how your gifting is used in application, then you start developing outcomes and tasks and things that you work towards. Like, okay, like, because what it is, you'll be like, that felt good, I want to do that again. Like, how do I do that again? And then you find more opportunities to kind of walk in that direction. And sometimes it goes from being something you volunteered doing to being what your career is, right? Like I like teaching people. And so when I started at my company as a technician, I just looked for opportunities to train people on things that they didn't know. Or I went and sought information that was unfamiliar or that was unique or was in another language. And then I would learn it. And then I just kept teaching people. But then they were like, well, why don't you just lead the people that you're teaching? And I was like, okay, like I'll do that. But I just really like teaching, right? So like, and it led to something else, and it actually amplified, or it highlighted another gift, which is the ability to lead people, not just educate or train them. So I think that's the thing. Like we've got to lean into that. And just be willing to serve and see not what we get out of it, but what we learn about ourselves from it. So like one thing I always do is whenever I promote somebody, I don't like promoting people to be in a people leading role without giving them an ability to come back. right? Because some people just like, they don't have the gift to be a manager, but they want to try it. So like we've got supervisor roles, and I'll let you go into a supervisor role, but I'll always let you go back to your old job if you don't want to stay there. Because it's basically like you do the same job you do as a technician, but you get to lead people. But if you're not good at leading people, I don't want you to leave the company. Just go back to doing your regular job, and we'll develop you as an individual contributor, as a technical expert, right? As whatever, but you're not good at leading people. So like, you know, being able to have those opportunities to just serve in different ways, you'll realize, like, I know people be like, I want to get into youth ministry. And then you go volunteer in the daycare, you'd be like, I hate kids. So maybe I'm not supposed to be in youth. You know what I mean? Like, I want to choke children. So I probably don't need to be in youth ministry. But serving teaches you that. And when you get into, you know, when you serve in different areas, it kind of, again, when you get that, when something resonates with you, and you feel that fulfillment, you know what I'm saying? Like you feel your spirit being kind of stoked by it. Then you keep gravitating towards those things that you know, that give you that uplift in your spirit.
I agree with that so much. And it speaks a lot to how God will allow us to find what it is we're called to. He won't just give it to us sometimes, so that we can go through the process of growing and maturing and being prepared for the calling. Like, I've been in volunteering and service pretty much my entire life. My earliest memory of serving was serving an older adult in my community growing up. I had to be elementary school age, and I would go over there, and while she would watch my brother and I after school, I would help her around the house, like with different things. She had diabetes and a couple other disabilities. So the more I did that as a kid, the more I just fell in love with it. And that matriculated all throughout middle school and high school, where I would put myself in positions to volunteer and help not just, you know, organizations, but people in my community. And I had been a part of this event in High Point called the Teach You Kid to Fish Day Derby. And basically it teaches kids how to fish. And then they give you about an hour to 2 hours, I think, to fish. And it's like a tournament. You win a trophy for the biggest fish or the most fish by age category. And I had been involved with that since I was really young. And then when I aged out of the program at 15, I got the opportunity to volunteer, and I kept volunteering up until the middle of college. And I was able to connect with people, parents. You know, you always get those parents who are watching like, I wish I would learn that, but I don't want to say nothing. So I would sense that and be able to teach them like, oh, this is how you bait a hook. This is how you tie a knot, all those things. And through that, I just kind of learned that I enjoyed serving, which ultimately led to me doing what I'm doing now and the major that I chose.
Yeah. And that's awesome. So yeah, so you going fishing with us. So get somebody else to bait hook. I finally got my North Carolina fishing license, so I'm not breaking no laws. But yeah, and I think that's the thing. Like we, you know, like I said, when you find that thing, like when I went back and looked, like I've worked in service my entire life. From the first job that I got to now, I've always been in service. And so I tell some of my mentees and my employees, I'm like, I feel like there's only two kind of people in the world. There's service people and sales people. And you fall in one of those two categories, right? Like people who do service are not very good at selling things, like not selling to a target, right? Like if you got a problem, I'll tell you what you need to buy to fix it. That's still service. But the people who try to sell you features and dreams and you know, like, oh, like, you know, that try to create a need in your mind, like that's a different kind of person. And I'm not that kind of person. So I've never worked in sales. Like even when I had my own company, like, you know, I had a credit repair company and all of this other stuff. But I'm like, in my life, like, and even now working in corporate America, I'm like, you got salespeople and you got service people. And it's very clear to me which category people fall in. And it's like, but when you, and because again, when I have to do salesy stuff, it's taxing to me, right? Like when I got to negotiate and talk about multi-million-dollar contracts, I'm like, I don't really care. And then it's like salespeople are excited. They're like, yeah, man, we good. Like I'm like, I don't care. Like this all sounds like a bunch of work to me. I'd rather go fix a problem. So, and so I think, yeah, like the more that we understand kind of where our natural giftings lead us to, like the more productive we can be, and we won't face burnout, because that's the other thing. Like when we're doing things that we're really not made to do, that's how we get burned out, because we're abusing ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Like I always use the example that, like, if I'm a Phillips head screwdriver, you can't damage me by using me to screw in a Phillips head screw. You just can't, because it's what I'm made for. But if you use me as a hammer, if you use me as a wedge or a chisel, or, you know what I'm saying, an ice pick, then you can damage me because you're using me outside of my purpose. You know what I'm saying? So like when you apply force to in the things that you're made of, then, you know what I'm saying, then like God gets that glory, and, you know, no man can boast because it's just what you were designed for. But when we try to do things through our own willpower, when we refuse to rest because our pride gets the best of us and we want to do everything and we want to be all things to all people. That's why I just did that video. Like you want to fail at life and keep saying yes to everybody and don't learn how to say no. But yeah, that's what it is.
All right. I have one last question, and it ties in with everything. So when it comes to things like busyness and productivity, there seems to be the common theme of comparison. Like whether you have a disability or not, it can be really easy to look at what somebody else is doing and compare that to what you either are not doing or the level at which you can do the thing that they're also doing. What are your thoughts on just combating comparison in the first place?
God said you were uniquely and wonderfully made. If you believe that, stop comparing yourself to other people. Right? Because what are you comparing to? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it takes a while for that to genuinely settle in, because it's just counter to our culture. But Christians are supposed to be counter to culture. Right? Like, I'm not supposed to be like the next Christian. I'm not supposed to be like the other pastor. I'm genuinely supposed to be me. So like, I'm not like, I don't like people get caught up on comparison, and it's in our design, right? Like you need the fruits of the spirit to be non-comparative. You know what I mean? Like you need self-control, you need meekness, you need joy, you need peace, because even our brains naturally look for patterns. You know what I'm saying? Like we are like our humanity is comparative, but our spirituality should be individualized, and we should understand that God uniquely made us for something. And when we do that, I think we actually more fitly join together as the body of Christ. Because like if you're supposed to be a left arm and I'm supposed to be a right arm, but I'm looking at you trying to do what the right arm is doing, then the body is just dysfunctional. You know what I'm saying? So like we're supposed to be individuals. And then when we come together, like there is no comparison, because the collaboration is so effective that the left hand isn't worrying about what the right hand is doing, because we're both doing the bidding of the Father. We're both doing what's edifying to the kingdom. So like that's where I always push people to, and people are like, man, well, you know, and I think Kalechi had asked the question, and he was like, you know, how do we stop comparing, you know, to where we are, like professionally, financially, you know, like, oh, everybody else is in their 20s and they get married, or everybody else is in their 30s and they buying a house. And I'm like, yeah, but then there are people in their 40s getting divorced. So when you turn 40, are you going to be looking for a divorce? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's weird how we pick and choose the comparison. But we should just like, the only thing we should be doing at all times is trying to close the gap between who God called us to be and who we currently are. Right? Like, that's what I need to be looking at. So my comparison is the broken wretchedness that I still am, and the glory that God would have me to meet next. Right. So like, if you stay there, it stops you from focusing on that other stuff. It stops you from being outside of your calling. It stops you from burning yourself out, because God will tell you to sit your behind down and rest. Right. People will tell you, you know what I'm saying, get your grind on, you know, generate this, throw that out there. Like I hadn't made a YouTube video in like 2 weeks, but like, who cares? Who am I comparing myself to? Am I trying to make as many videos as Ruslan? Am I competing with, you know what I'm saying? Like I just canceled vidIQ. just because vidIQ is annoying to me because you're always comparing me to other people's pages. I don't care what other people's pages are doing. I'm like, why am I paying for comparative data that I don't care about? And so even in that, like, I check myself and be like, even if it's unintentional, like, I really don't want to know. Like, I genuinely want to be doing what God called me to do, right? And again, since I've got limited energy and in this life, in this version of life that I have now, I don't want to be wasteful. And I can be wasteful chasing somebody else's dream just because I saw it or because I'm comparing myself to them. And it's funny for me to see it because it's very, like, in our neighborhood, it's very, like, visible, you know what I'm saying? Like, the nature of comparison. So, like, you know, one person cuts their grass, everybody cuts their grass. Like, one person goes buy new mulch, everybody buys new mulch. And I'm like everybody put put bricks around their tree. I'm like, I'm not doing none of that. Like, the landscaping that came with this house when I bought it is what's staying here. Like, I'm gonna put some mulch down and then I'm gonna spray paint it when it changed colors. Like, I'm not, but it's crazy because I watch it go from house to house to house to house. Like, even Christmas, like, one person decorate, then the whole block be decorated. But it's that comparison where people feel like, oh, I've got to keep up with the Joneses, or I've got to reflect back what people are showing me. And I think most people don't want to see a mirror. Most people want to see you. So just be you. Like, I genuinely like meeting people who are different than me. I hate when people start acting like me when they're around me, because I don't like me that much that I want to be around another me all day. I already got to deal with myself. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, but people will do that. They'll start mimicking, and I'm like, cut it out. Like, I do not need another me.
That's hilarious. That is hilarious. And all that you said is very true, and it makes me think about just how, even as something, you know, like YouTube, it could be very easy to compare yourself. And I remember I was on a Zoom call with you and Ruslan, and I asked the question. I was like, how often should I post given, you know, my conditions and whatnot? And you said something that has helped me ever since. This was like a month ago. You were like, be your level of consistency. Don't try to be someone else's level of consistency. So if that looks like posting once every month or once every week, whatever you can do and you can do it well, do that. And like, from that point on, I keep that in the back of my mind, because one, I don't ever want to be in the position where views or numbers or trying to compete with other people becomes my goal instead of my original goal, which is to engage with people, to showcase the glory of God in spite of disability. And I don't ever want to lose sight of that.
Yeah. And that's a good thing. Like, you know, and even in consistency. And I, you know, like, again, I give advice like that. And then I was doing the savage news every day. And I'm like, why am I doing this every day? Right? Because it was like, and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that no more. I'm like, if my Patreons want to talk to me about the news, they can send me a message. But it was, you know what I mean? Like, because it was practice for a little bit. Like, let me get down, like, recording and get it succinct and using the Stream Deck. Because again, it's the automation. Like, how can I more quickly create a video so I don't have to sit here longer than necessary editing it? But now my videos are down to like one-step processes, and it's super easy to do. But yeah, the same thing. Like, I looked one day and I'm like, I had made a Savage News video. I don't even remember what it was on, but I'm like, I don't want to respond to any of these comments because I don't care. Like, I really don't care. And then my conviction was then, like, why are you making it? Like, why are you making videos you got to disable the comments on, when the only reason you made videos is because people couldn't comment on your podcast? So it was like, now you contradicting yourself. And I was like, you right, self, in spirit of the Lord. So, like, and I just stopped. And I know people were like, what the heck happened to the news? I just stopped because that's how I am. Like, if I get out of alignment and I start doing things in my own will, I will stop them immediately. That's why I did a video on shutting down a church after opening it for 5 weeks, right? Like, and that's what I felt. Like, I felt that conviction, like, you're doing this to generate the views, to get more subscribers, and to keep touching the algorithm. And I'm like, that's not a good enough reason for me to keep doing it. So I stopped because I was taking time away from my family, right? Like, I'm recording videos every night instead of participating in the process of putting my kids to sleep. Like no, like it's not worth it. So I'll record videos when I got time, and you know, people want the news, they can go read the paper. But
that part. On that note, it's been great talking to you, and I want to say thank you to everybody in the chat. Before we head out, are there any projects that you're working on? Tell them where they can find you, all those wonderful things.
yeah, everything is pretty much on Patreon or on YouTube. So so I'm trying to consolidate all of our, I mean, you know, we're opening up a justice, a justice center to provide legal aid to disenfranchised communities. I got an email while I've been sitting here. We got another lawyer on deck. So working on that and just, you know, taking care of the community, loving people that are out there, man. But other than that, yeah, people can find me on YouTube, Pastor Roy Dockery, Instagram, Pastor Roy Dockery. For the old folk and the grown folk that be on LinkedIn, you know, just Roy Dockery on the LinkedIn.
Hey, that's awesome. Well, y'all, thank you again, Pastor Roy, for coming on the podcast. You are an official member of the Better Not Bitter family, so welcome. And thank you to the audience for your involvement and interaction. And without further ado, remember to live each day with the aim of becoming better and not bitter. And I'll see you next time.
Amen.